That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hello. Welcome to episode 1 of season 3 of Only Human, and we're sure glad to have you with us. So just so you know a little bit, we run 23 episode seasons, and then we stop, we pause, we take a look at some things, and we hope that reviewing some feedback, we've made a few improvements. So there aren't a lot of obvious changes to you this season, other than we hope we're a bit more organized and a bit more thematic as opposed to the way my mind works, which is shattered shards of wit and wisdom cast hither and yon. So season 3 is going to be a little bit different, a little bit more organized. So today's episode is called Look in the Mirror. And today we are launching an entire season about what Socrates tells us is the fountain of all wisdom, right? To get to know yourself. The tagline for this entire season is dive deep, rise strong. Trust me, there's a lot more here than meets the eye. Some of it you may have heard before from somewhere else or someone else. Some of it will sound familiar, but needs a little bit more in-depth discussion to be actually useful to you. And some of it will flat out blow your mind. That I promise. So let's get started with one simple question. Who are you? Who are you? If your answer is, it depends, you're already ahead of the game on the first section of today's podcast. So we all have at least 4 identities, and I've mentioned these before. One of the first things we need to understand about ourselves is that we have to deal with these identities that we have simultaneously every day in real life. So here they are, our public identity, our private identity, our secret identity, and our hidden identity. And combined, they all form who we truly are. And that's what we want to discover. So that's what we're going into today. So let's start with public identity. Public identity is what we show the world. It's what I'm showing you now. It's our professional image and our outward appearance. And, it's pretty important. It's always been important in the workplace and in society in general. But it may or may not reflect who we truly are. In fact, it certainly doesn't represent all that we are, right? It probably doesn't represent most of whom we are, but it does represent what we show the world. So let's move on to the next one. It's our private identity. That's usually known only to our closest family and friends, maybe a few friends. These are our, personal quirky habits and guilty pleasures. We don't want to show this side of ourselves to everybody, but it's a part of who we are nonetheless. Now, this is going to get me in trouble, but I am going to share with you part of my private identity just because I think it's important for you to understand what I'm talking about with a real life example. So you might think I'm a pretty organized guy. I mean, we drop podcasts every week. I write books. I run a company. There's a lot of things that I do that outwardly make it appear like I got my life together pretty well. But that's not always true, right? In my bedroom, my wife and I both have a chair in different corners of our bedroom, and hers is always cleaned off, right? Mine, not so much so. After work every day, I live on a ranch like most of you know. I have to go down and put in about 90 minutes of work with my horses and my chickens and checking the fences and all that stuff. By the time I get in, I'm pretty sweaty and stinky. And so before dinner, I usually shed my work clothes. But you know what? I don't really care if I have clean work clothes tomorrow. So where do they go? On the chair, right? They go on the chair. And over time, that pile, for some reason, seems to grow to a point where it's kind of ridiculous. You can't even see the chair. My beautiful bride will come in every once in a while and says, I don't even have to look over there because I can smell it. So what I do then, she goes, you've got to clean this up. So what I do is I get a big armload of this stuff and I throw it in my closet, along with my dirty, stinky socks and my boots and all that stuff. I know this is too much information, but I told you we all have a private identity. So then, I spray a little air freshener around and it's all good. She comes in, I'm happy, and she goes, open the closet door. You open the closet door and it's like horrific, man. It's absolutely horrific. So anyways, those are the kind of things that we keep to ourselves, and probably rightfully so. Public identity, private identity. There's one important word that measures the distance between your public identity and your private identity. Any guess on what it is? Authenticity. Authenticity. The closer you are to who you really are and who you show the world, the more authentic you are. And I work hard. In fact, I just gave you an example of trying to keep my public identity as close to my private identity as it will allow. Right? I want you to know who I am and what I stand for, and I don't want to feel like an imposter. So you get something that's pretty raw and real from me, even though it's not always polished and sometimes maybe even not socially acceptable, right? All right, so far we've covered public identity and private identity. Next, we're going to go to this idea of a secret identity. What the heck could that be? Secret identity is one we keep hidden from everyone except ourselves, but we still know about it, right? In fact, we can't help but know about it because it's our innermost desires, right? Secret ambitions, right? Some of these things are so far out there that even our closest family members don't know about it. Yet this is always present, and it drives us, right? Or it distracts us from what we're doing at any given moment in time. The secret identity, those deep-seated desires, fears, ambitions that we don't even show our closest friends and family members. Finally, and maybe most mysteriously, we all have what I call a hidden identity that lives beneath the surface of our conscious thought. Like, if I think about it, I can figure out my private identity and my secret identity. I can think about those things consciously and bring them to the surface. Hidden identity, I can't, right? It's kind of where your biases live. Might be even somewhat genetically coded, passed down from generations. If you've ever wondered why certain situations or certain people just strike you the wrong way, but you have no idea why they do. They haven't done anything or said anything openly that made you feel this way. This probably is your hidden identity at work. Like I said, our biases live there. It's deep inside, and it's unknown to our conscious mind. But if we dig hard enough, we might be able to unmask those and become a lot more aware of what they are and what they do to us, and maybe even why we have some of those feelings like we have. So all these things, public identity, private identity, secret identity, hidden identity, I think all glom together to form what our true identity is, who we really are at our core. I mean, there's layers upon layers, like an onion. It's like we're peeling the onion here. So much to learn and so much to leverage. And that's a little bit of an indicator of where we'll be going over the next few weeks. So that's kind of Tony's view of it, but where did it come from? I haven't had an original thought in my life, right? So let's go to some of the people that have talked about this and written about it, really smart people, right? Psychologist Carl Jung, J-U-N-J, Jung, however it's pronounced. Many, many years ago, he talked about something he called a shadow self. He believed we each had a shadow, right? Not like Peter Pan's shadow running around trying to get away from any of that stuff, but something different, more like the stuff we don't want to admit about ourselves, right? Part of our private identity, part of our secret identity, part of our hidden identity. That's what Jung called our shadow self. And while here or out in the world when we meet each other, we smile politely, there are times, for example, if I'm sitting down at a dinner or something like that, when I'm out on the road in the workplace, and somebody's constantly fiddling with their phone, right? Drives me crazy. I think to myself, how rude, how inappropriate, all that stuff. That's my shadow at work, right? I want to say something, but it's not socially acceptable to say anything. The guy's probably got legitimate reasons why he's doing what he's doing, but it drives me crazy. And so if we want to be decent human beings, we kind of got to get cozy with this shadow and know how to avoid it from taking over at times when we don't want it to. But that's better than pretending it doesn't exist, right? We can learn a thing or two about asking ourselves why we feel the way we do. So Jung wasn't the only one. Sigmund Freud, right? That guy that's famous for saying everything's about your mother. He had this idea that he couldn't really explain very well, but he wrote a lot of words not explaining it very well. And it's all about our subconscious, right? And he used the metaphor of the iceberg, right? The stuff that we're aware of is the little tiny bit above water. But Freud says most of what makes us up is below the surface. And he went into some places that we'll talk about a little bit more here in a minute. He said your dreams, the things you remember and the things you forget about your childhood. And yeah, unresolved issues with your parents, right? That unconscious stuff, according to Freud, drives a lot of our behavior without us even realizing it. So, while we're busy trying to figure out what shirt to wear for the podcast, all these things in our subconscious are working almost like a backstage crew, right? Setting the lights, setting up the stage, pulling the levers inside our head, which affects our mood and our choices. So Jung, Freud, what about modern research? So now we got this thing, magnetic resonance imaging, MRIs, and all sorts of variations on that. High-end artificial intelligence computer algorithms that can measure our brain waves as we respond to different stimuli, right? So what's that tell us? It backs up all this stuff, but it adds a little more flavor into the recipe. The neuroscientists today say our brain's is kind of like a really busy office with a few people in the front office, which is our conscious thoughts, working right out there for the public to see, and then a whole bunch of others. And they're really starting to narrow these things down, which are unconscious processes, or maybe better said, subconscious processes that are in the back office, right? They're doing all kinds of things. These back office workers are critical, right? They help us walk, talk, chew gum at the same time without thinking about it, right? But sometimes they send us conflicting signals. Not everybody in the back office agrees with one another, right? Like we get this gut feeling not to trust somebody, and we can't explain why, right? It's becoming more and more clear that there are layers in the mind that are constantly interacting but not always agreeing, and they shape every single thing from our preferences to our fears. Pretty strong indication that our subconscious minds have more impact on anything we can do in our conscious minds, like everything they tell us to do, positive thinking, setting up new habits, emotional intelligence, all those things. So the more we can use our conscious minds to drive deeper in, right? Dive deeper, rise stronger. The more we can understand those things. And if we can understand them, the more we might be able to impact them. We have to train our back office workers as good as we do our front office workers, right? So, I think back office workers, think of them as all the gremlins behind the curtains. Discovering what they do and who they are is a little bit like a detective work. Except the mystery we're trying to solve is who we really are and how we can use those things to improve what we do here on the conscious side of the curtain. Your shadow, your unconscious, all those hidden drives, they're sneaky. They're not out front, but they do leave clues, right? And I'd like to offer you a few ways that I use, some of them more effective than others, to try to uncover some of those subconscious things. One of the first things, pretty obvious, I try to notice what triggers me. Okay? What gets under my skin? What makes me inexplicably happy or joyful? I hate being interrupted when I'm talking. Right? I don't like it, and nobody does, when I send a text or an email and nobody responds. Right? But sometimes it really pisses me off, right? More than it should. That's one of those gremlins behind the curtain saying, I'm right here. I'm telling you what's going on. All you have to do is ask, right? And so what do you ask? You say, why did this one bug me so much? And the answer to that question might lead you to something that's buried deeper, right? Maybe an old insecurity, a hidden strength, or some unresolved frustration from your past. So look for your triggers and then dig a little deeper. Number two, closely related, but I like to say there's three ways we know things. We know it with our head, we know it with our heart, and we know it with our gut, right? So what does that mean? Our head is our mental cognitive side, our heart is our emotional side, and our gut is our experiential side, things that we've learned from life. So number two on my list of ways I try to figure out what's going on inside me, listen to your gut feelings, right? Like I said, your unconscious is always working. Like, kind of think of it as Wi-Fi at home. When it's doing its job, I'm happy. Everything just works, right? Streaming videos, watching TV, scrolling social media. But the moment something goes wrong, everything seems to break down, right? Suddenly you realize how much your Wi-Fi does for you. It's the same exact thing with your subconscious. It's handling all those background tasks, making sure you don't forget to breathe. You can stand up and put one foot in front of the other, to subtly influencing how you feel about somebody you just met, right? All while you go about your day, blissfully unaware that it's working. But when it glitches and you get that uncomfortable gut feeling that something's right or wrong for no obvious reason, you start to notice its influence. Right? Number two, listen to your gut. Number three, this is kind of a weird one. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm not sure I'm getting much out of it, but it's fun. Explore your dreams. Freud and a host of others have pointed out that your dreams don't come from nowhere. They come out of your subconscious. Now, I will tell you flat out that I believe in a higher power, or let's just say principalities beyond myself, that have a way of getting in my head. Because sometimes I have dreams that there's just no way it came out of my subconscious. It just seems like too impossible. So it's a bit out there, but hear me out. Dreams are like little movies that your mind creates when it relaxes and go to sleep. They often reflect a lot of things that you're not truly aware of during the day. If you have that reoccurring nightmare, right? I had one for most of my life. I haven't had it probably in a couple decades now, but of walking past a closet in a house that I used to live in with my mom and dad. And I had to walk through the living room from my bedroom to get to the kitchen where they were every morning having coffee, and something would come out of the closet, paralyze me, make me mute, and pull me back toward the closet. Now, we've probably all, maybe not, but we've probably all had some sort of dream like that. Over time, I learned to look at that closet door, and if it started to crack open, I'd run really fast and get to mom and dad, or I'd scream before he could mute me. Right? So it's bizarre, but your conscious mind can impact your subconscious mind. It's worth kind of noticing those dreams. You might notice other patterns, like you're always losing something, right? You've got to go somewhere and you can't find your keys, or all those things give you clues toward maybe your hidden fears, thoughts, feelings, things that happen to you along the way. So explore your dreams. And number 4, because dreams fade so fast, and listening to your gut feelings, you'll think about it for a second, forget about it. Journal it out. Number 4 is journal it out. And, journaling, everybody talks about journaling. I have a notebook I carry with me literally everywhere I go. I was once told a good student is not ever without a pencil and a paper. So I took that to heart. Sometimes you just have to write things down in order to be able to track them and see how frequently they're happening or how powerful they made you feel. And when you do that and you go back and you read and you reflect on them, you can uncover some really cool things, right? Don't censor yourself. This is just for you, right? It's not a diary. It's just, hey, this is a dream, part of my dream stuff. This is part of my gut feeling stuff, right? So write without censoring yourself. Review it often enough to pull some things out for you to consciously think about. So when we look at all these layers, different identities, subconscious thoughts that we have, dreams, why is it so important to the purpose of this podcast, growing where we are with the resources at hand? Because if a lot of our moods and motivations come from underneath our conscious thought, from identities we're not aware of, and we can leverage those, then we've got a real tool. We don't need extra resources. We don't need extra money, training, or time even. If they're affecting your life, especially if you don't know it, if they influence how you act, how you react, how we think in ways that don't serve us, excuse me, or even ways that do, it's amazingly powerful stuff. And instead of being, unknowingly sabotaged by your own hidden identities, secret identities, unconscious thoughts or habits, biases, you start making decisions about what you really want, not what your inner gremlins are pushing you toward, right? I guess in short, by figuring out what's going on behind the curtain, you stop being the puppet and you start being the puppet master. So that's about as far as I want to go into the 4 identities today. We talked about our public identity, our private identity, our secret identity, and our hidden identity. And then we talked about how we can begin to unlock these things. I gave you kind of a 4-step process. Notice what triggers you, listen to your gut, explore your dreams, and write it all down by journaling it out. And I think it's a start, right? It's a start. So as we move forward here in season 3, I'm going to give you a title of a couple of podcasts that are coming up, just to give you an idea and hopefully get you hooked here. The next one, we're going to look a lot more at this concept of authenticity, right? The title of the podcast, working title, is The Masks We Wear: How to Close the Gap Between Our Public and Private Identity. So we want to expand on this idea. How do we navigate this tension between what we want the world to know and who we really are? And we're going to talk about tips and boundaries and expectations and all kinds of things. Then I want to talk a little bit more about this subconscious inner critic that we all have. I'm calling it a frenemy, right? What that internal voice that can manifest itself in a lot of things, imposter syndrome, narcissism, all kinds of stuff, how we can learn to train that inner voice. I want to go deeper in a podcast coming up this season on the neuroscience of kind of rewiring our brain, how we can think a little bit better through some things called neuroelasticity and all that stuff. I won't get too far down the road with that one, I promise. And at any rate, I want to wrap up our first episode of season 3 this way. This one's going to be far more organized. We're going to take a journey into getting to know ourselves better. We're going to peel back layers of the onion to help us manage our thoughts, our behaviors, our motivations, right? And I think those are all very, very key things to growing where we are with the resources at hand. So thank you so much for joining us. Please, like always, like, follow, and share. If you could share this podcast, I will be greatly appreciative. We are growing a little slower than I'd like, but we're still out there in more than 50 nations around the world. And I know that we have a lot more people that could use what we're talking about and that we can reach them. So if you do that, it'd be awesome. Remember, every day is an opportunity to improve. Every experience is another lesson, but only if we make it that way. So every Tuesday, 9 o'clock Eastern, we drop a new podcast. And until next Tuesday, I will see you soon.